It's a really good football team coming to Fro Field. The Big 12 champions. This ought to be a really great environment and really what college football is all about. A lot of people and two quality football teams battling it out with a lot of bragging rights on the line. So our team has to focus on what we can improve on this week, and there's plenty of things from the tape that we want to focus on improving. You have to play your best ball. So we got our work cut out for us.
And welcome back into the Tiger Kickoff Show presented by the Columbia Missourian. I am your host, Harrison Vapnek, joined alongside the beat writers of the MU football team, Ryerson, Brandon Haynes, and Wendell Shepherd. Style points, once again, wearing the shades. It's game day. I haven't really been wearing the shades a couple games, easy games for the Tigers. I was waiting for a big game. The big game is here. Tigers, Wildcats. Style points. How am I looking, guys?
Oh, you look good, man.
You look great.
Always trying to look like you guys. You guys set the standard. I'm chasing you guys, and the Tigers are gonna be hopefully chasing a victory this weekend against the Wildcats on Saturday at Fro. How are we feeling?
Good. I think you stepped it up above us. We're gonna be chasing down you in that nice little suit combo.
Yeah, I got the blazer, got the blue shirt. We look good. And the words of Ryerson: look good, feel good, play good. Quoting the man himself.
He's a poet.
We have a big game this Saturday from Fro, as mentioned. Missouri and Kansas State got to take the shades off because the future is too bright. Last year, it was not a bright game for the Tigers. A 40-12 loss in Manhattan over the Wildcats. They were doomed from the start. Deuce Vaughn, a big game on the ground. No Deuce Vaughn for the Wildcats this year, but a lot of returning production from the defending Big 12 champions. Missouri enters this game as an underdog. They've heard the noise over the last week or so after the struggle performance against Middle Tennessee and the win. But they got the win and have a chance to get another one on Saturday. I'll start with you, Wendell. What is the key to a Mizzou upset on Saturday?
One of the biggest keys, if not the biggest, I think is the performance of the O-line. I think they're going to have to play a clean game, no penalties. And they're also just going to have to block. K-State's defensive front is strong, really strong, and they're going to have to give Brady Cook some time back there, open up some running lanes. I think that's going to be a big thing to watch out for.
Adam, the defense has been up and down so far. Not a lot of points given up, but haven't forced a ton of turnovers. What do you think the number one key to a Mizzou upset on Saturday over Kansas State is?
Yeah, the defense has been super bend, don't break so far this year. And like you said, not a lot of points giving up, but they have to force turnovers. 2 games down, no turnovers forced. If you're going to be playing a superior opponent like Kansas State, you need to be able to force the turnovers. If they're not able to win the possession battle, then I don't see a way where they can win this game.
It's only about 15% is the chance that you have to go 3 consecutive games without forcing a turnover. The only Power 5 teams through 2 games to not force a turnover: Missouri, Florida, Arizona State, Stanford, and Wisconsin. A very slim number. The Tigers will have to force turnovers on Saturday to give them a chance. Brandon, I'll turn to you. What do you think the number one key for a win is?
This is actually something Mizzou has done well so far, and it's the red zone offense. They've scored on 8 of 9 tries in the red zone, mixture of field goals and touchdowns. But the key to it is going to be maximizing those touchdowns. It's easy to kind of look at the board and go field goal and field goal and field goal. But against a Kansas State team that's ranked number 15 in the country, they're going to need to put points on the board. And throughout the offseason, Brady Cook talked about it. Kirby Moore talked about it. It was the opportunity to score points, score touchdowns, and they have an opportunity now to do that. So they'll just need to maximize those attempts this weekend.
And it almost takes a step up having to convert in the red zone because of questions in the field goal game right now. We saw Harrison Mevis miss a couple against South Dakota, missed an extra point last week against Middle Tennessee. How important is it for special teams, either of you can chime in on this, for having impact in this game?
Yeah, it's pretty essential. I mean, honestly, the best part of Missouri special teams so far has been Luther Burden, being able to do some stuff on punt returns, but outside of that, there hasn't been any really highlights from the special teams. They had the punt block in the first game. Obviously, if they can do that again, that'd be fantastic. But as for the offense, coaches always say every possession should end in a kick, whether it's a field goal, an extra point, either one of those, no punting, no turnovers. If you end it with your kicker on the field, then you'll do a good job.
There's a ton of matchups to watch out for in this game. Last year, the big matchup that we saw was Kansas State's quarterback Adrian Martinez, who didn't have a ton of experience, against a new-look Mizzou defense, and Kansas State was able to run the ball all over the Tigers. A lot of different matchups for this game to look out for. Wendell, what is the number one you have your eyes on?
Going to the opposite O-line, I'm looking forward to watching Kansas State's offensive line versus Mizzou's D-line. I think when healthy, this Kansas State O-line is one of, if not the best in the country, but they're dealing with injury right now. The right tackle, Christian Duffy, has been dealing with injuries, missed the first 2 weeks of the season. Their left guard, Cooper Beebe, has been working at right tackle, which isn't a very natural transition. And they've been allowing some pressure. It hasn't cost them yet because they've played an FCS opponent and Troy, who they beat last week. So I think Mizzou's defense could give them a lot of problems. So that's a matchup I'm looking out for, and I think that's something that could turn the tide for Mizzou.
And this is a Mizzou defense that forced 12 tackles per loss last week, including 2 sacks from Gaddy, making impact in the backfield. Adam, I'll turn to you. What matchup do you think have your eyes on Saturday?
The big one for me is it's Mizzou against the money downs. 3rd and 4th downs, both sides of the ball have not been going as well as the team would have hoped for to start the season. They were able to start converting 3rd downs in last week's game, but they started the game 0 for 4 on 3rd downs, didn't go for it on 4th down at all, like we've talked about. The play calling, we'll see if that changes and if they're a little more aggressive now in the biggest game of the season so far. But the defense has also struggled to get off the field. And the more time that your defense is on the field, especially against Kansas State, the more they're going to be able to have the chance to put up points. And K-State's got a pretty solid offense. They got good receivers. They're pretty well balanced. If you keep them on the field for 10, 12, 14 play drives, they're going to score points.
And we talked about on Monday's show how Missouri doesn't even attempt a 4th down this season. Do you think the play calling has to be more aggressive on those money downs to have a chance to pull off an upset like this?
Not only does it need to be more aggressive, it needs to be more balanced. I think we already talked about it, but 46 rushing attempts to 19 passing attempts is not going to cut it, especially against the number 15 team in the nation. You need to be balanced, and you need to be able to take the top off the defense and get that ball down the field.
Brandon, sometimes the matchups we look out for don't specifically happen just on the field. Missouri has an offensive coordinator, Kirby Moore, who's been here for 2 games. Kansas State has a defensive coordinator, Joe Klanderman, who's been there since 2019. And last year, they had one of the best defenses in the whole country. What kind of matchup are we looking out for between those two?
I just think kind of what Adam was talking about, that play calling duties. Obviously, Kansas State runs out a 3-3-5 defense, so it's kind of an odd stack. So it brings a lot of speed and athleticism kind of throughout the field, throughout the edge, stuff like that. They've been able to kind of overwhelm SEMO and Troy in their first 2 matchups. Obviously, those are lesser opponents you'd think about than Mizzou, but with Mizzou's offensive line looking the way it has, it's just a question there. But especially with Kirby Moore, we haven't seen complete what seems like difference from last year's play calling and stuff. And so it'll be interesting with a team like Kansas State, another Power 5 program coming into Columbia, whether we see a difference in the types of plays that were being called in the first 2 weeks. We've talked about it on the show about, is Drinkwitz hiding something? This will be the moment to see it, and it'll be good to watch that matchup of Moore and Klanderman to see how they balance each other, especially with K-State, kind of with the momentum and confidence that last year brought. On their defensive side specifically, kind of against Missouri's offense, which is searching for its footing.
I think my matchup, I'm going to go to the other coordinator, Blake Baker, against Will Howard, the quarterback for Kansas State. Howard has turned the ball over 6 times going back to his starts last season, so he takes pretty good care of the ball, and this is a Tigers team that we talked about, has not forced a single turnover all season long. To pull off an upset like this, to beat a top 15 team like Kansas State, you got to force turnovers. Blake Baker is going to have to be in his bag play calling on Saturday and bring some pressures, bring some different looks, steal a possession or 2, because that's going to be the key to Missouri pulling off a big win. We'll now turn to what our writers are writing about this week for their features, looking ahead to the Tigers and the Wildcats. Wendell, I know you dived into the history of these 2 former Big 12 rivals. What does this game mean in terms of the historical outlook, but also in the current landscape of, this could be one of the biggest wins that Missouri's had since Eli Drinkwitz has been here? Yeah,
Missouri and Kansas State is one of the longest rivalries in college football, over 100 years of history here. This is the 99th meeting between these 2 teams. And this is, Mizzou has usually won this rivalry. As of recently, though, K-State's been really strong under Chris Klieman after the departure of Bill Snyder. He retired. But I think in the current landscape, this could be a very kind of program-changing win, I think, for Eli Drinkwitz. We talked before the show how this could be one of the biggest wins, if not the biggest one of Eli Drinkwitz's career, and it kind of parallels Gary Pinkel's career back in the beginning of the century. He struggled early on in his career against Kansas State, got a big win in 2006, turned things around. I think that this game has that same kind of weight, and that's something I kind of talked about a bit this week.
Yeah, Adam, you talked about two of Missouri's defensive backs being reunited. One of them who's been here for several years, one of them who's a transfer from Florida State. Tell me about Kris Abrams-Draine and Sidney Williams.
Yeah, the two of them, they're second cousins. Grandpas are brothers. I got a lot of good stuff. I think that Mizzou fans are really going to enjoy, especially Mizzou Twitter. I got some pictures of Kris. Started playing tackle football at the age of 4 years old. So, yeah, very young. His dad said that he knew that Kris was going to be a baller, and he had a little bit of a prodigy on his hands. Right as he was sitting up, he was giving him footballs, and he wasn't going to put the ball down. So hopefully, doesn't put the ball down. If he gets one thrown at his way, he can get a little interception. And, I would love to see the memes that come out of some of the younger pictures I have of Cad.
That would be a great then and now if he's able to get a pick on Saturday against Kansas State. Brandon, I don't think any unit on the entire football team has been talked about more than the offensive line over the past 5-6 days. From Eli Drinkwitz's press conference in the middle of the week to Eli Drinkwitz's press conference after the game to Mizzou fans on Twitter complaining about it. Tell us right now, I know you're writing about this week, where the offensive line stands into Saturday's game.
The offensive line needs a statement back to what they've kind of done in the past 2 weeks. They've had 7 penalties in the first 2 games. That just won't cut it. Just as far as SEC level, this is against South Dakota and Middle Tennessee. It's not against Power 5 competition. So the fact that they're false starting, holding penalties, stuff like that, we've seen multiple runs of 10-plus yards get called off because they just can't seem to stop holding the defender and everything. So that's a big part of it, and then the pressure that they've kind of allowed. Brady Cook got sacked 4 times last week. We saw 7 tackles for loss as well. And those are numbers that, against a Middle Tennessee State team that did blitz, it's concerning, but especially with Kansas State coming into town, they got those DNs and defensive line that is ready to pounce. So it'll just be interesting to watch.
Yep, we'll have to protect Brady Cook, and you can read those articles right when this show comes out on usually Friday mornings. Before we get to our game picks, we have a little game for you guys. You guys can either team up, you guys can go individually, but we have some Missouri-Kansas State history trivia. Wendell mentioned this is the 99th matchup between the Wildcats and the Tigers. So why don't we dive into 2 programs who have actually had similar paths. You guys ready? Mm-hmm. So question number 1 is, which team has had more Pro Bowlers drafted since the year 2000? You guys want to work together or go with your individual answers?
Pro Bowlers since 2000. Mitch Morse. Pro Bowler.
Sheldon Richardson.
Bolton was a Pro Bowler.
Macklin, did he ever have a Pro Bowl year? You said since 2000, right?
Yeah. Which team has more? I'm not looking for an exact number.
I think I'm going to go Mizzou.
I'm gonna go
I
Mizzou
think it's
as
just because they were so that K-State kind of fell off a little bit after the first retirement of Bill Snyder. So I think I'm going to go Mizzou.
I'm going to say Mizzou as well.
You got Mizzou down there, 3 for 3. You guys are right. Mizzou 6'5", Missouri 6 Pro Bowlers. Sheldon Richardson, Alden Smith, William Moore, Jeremy Macklin, Justin Smith, and Mitch Morse. Kansas State has Tyler Lockett, Cody Whitehair, Jordy Nelson, Darren Sproles, and Terrence Newman. Second one, which team has the more consensus All-Americans all time, not just since 2000? Consensus All-Americans in the history of their programs. Which team has more?
Consensus All-Americans.
That's so hard.
Deuce Vaughn was 1.
Trying to think who from...
This is 100 years of history, so if you're trying to dive back, you might take us a little bit to get through the show.
I think I'm going to say Mizzou again.
I think I have to say Mizzou just because I read, when I was doing research, I read that Sports Illustrated, in I think it was 1989, dubbed K-State the worst program in college football history. Kind of fun fact, Bill Snyder, 10 years later, had them finish as the #1 team in the nation after the regular season poll. So crazy how he flipped that program around, but just knowing how bad the history of K-State is, I think I'm going to have to go Mizzou again.
Brandon?
I'm going to go K-State on this one.
14-13, Kansas State. Because Deuce Vaughn was 21
was
and
the one?
22.
Oh.
Missouri hasn't had one since Shane Wright 2014. Last question, we'll fly through this one. The last 2 Heisman finalists from each of these programs was a quarterback. Who were they?
Oh, I got them.
Yeah, both?
Yeah.
You know?
Did we mention both of them before the show?
Possibly.
Yes.
Wow. Okay. So.
Can I just...
Yeah, you know it. Just
you
go
rip
ahead.
it.
Chase Daniel, Josh Freeman.
You got one of them.
Oh, no.
Chase Daniel, 2007
Was it-
Heisman finalist. Kansas State is another quarterback who was
Was
a
it
Heisman
Skyler?
finalist.
Was it?
Not
No.
Skyler.
Okay.
I don't know who it is then. Oh, it's probably one of the...
The older guys?
yeah,
You guys been covering this matchup. You guys should actually know this answer.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Harry. We're trying here.
It's actually current Kansas State offensive coordinator Colin Klein.
What?
2012
Wow.
finished, I think, right behind whoever the winner
Is
in
it 2012?
Yeah, 2012.
Wow.
That might have been.
It's a surprising one. That was
is.
They were the number one team in the country,
I think
and they
that was
lost to Baylor that season.
I did
was
read
that
about that
RG3?
game.
No, Argentina was the season before.
That might be one of the Bama running back years.
Well, the Tiger trivia worked out successfully in stumping our beat writers. We'll now turn to our game picks. Wendell, Tigers or Wildcats?
I went back and forth on this a lot during the week, but I'm going to have to say Kansas State. They're just a better team on paper. I think would not be at all surprised if Mizzou wins this game. I think they're very capable, but they haven't shown that, so I'm going to go with Kansas State.
Adam?
I'm in the same boat. It was a hard one to pick, but I think it's going to be relatively low scoring. I think that K-State's going to win. I think it's going to be 24-21.
Brandon, you going to make it 3 for 3 on the Wildcats?
I'm going to choose Mizzou on this one.
Oh, okay.
I think this will be a statement victory for Drinkwitz. Obviously, we talked about it being potentially his biggest victory as the Tigers head coach. Harrison, like you were saying, 15% of it's a 15% chance to start 3 games without a takeaway.
Yep.
I think that changes this week. I think there's possibly some things that Drinkwitz has not shown in the playbook that we will see against Kansas State with the pressure and the kind of the build up to this game. I think everybody's excited. Drinkwitz had a little grin yesterday when he was talking about what the players were excited about, thinking about last year's game, and I think they're motivated to kind of put last year's statement loss kind of in the books and create a new tradition of winning.
I think that's very well said. Last week was obviously very sluggish against Middle Tennessee, possibly a look-ahead spot, and I love the revenge spot you just mentioned. 40-12 last year. It was over from the beginning. I think that I have that in the back of their minds. I also think they've heard all the noise this week about how maybe they're not very good and they're ranked not in the spot that they should be. I think they pull off the upset on Saturday. I'm picking Missouri. I'm putting the style point shades back on. Tigers on a last-second Harrison Mevis field goal defeats Kansas State 24-21 to improve to 3-0 and have a statement victory for the program, as Wendell, you were talking about earlier.
Yeah. It's very possible.
Should be a very good game on Saturday. They're up on the board. We got 2 Missouris, 2 Kansas States against the 15th team in the country. Come to town. Should be an awesome game Saturday. Can't wait to have our eyes on it.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. It's
It'll
going
be
to be a
a
good
fun
one.
Thank you guys so much for tuning in to this episode of the Tiger Kickoff Show. We'll be back next Monday to recap the Tigers and the Wildcats and begin to look ahead to Missouri and Memphis next week. I'm Harrison Vapnek. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you next time.